Biruchim haboim. Welcome everyone. We're about to begin Be'ezras Hashem together on Daf Samich Ches Amud Beis. 5 lines from the top. The Mishnah states 3 cases where there's a machlokes whether they are doiches hashabbos. The first one being carrying an animal from the outside into the Beis Hamikdash. Secondly, leading an animal from outside the Techum to the Beis Hamikdash as a Korban Pesach. And the third one, when the animal, for example the lamb, has a yabeles, a wart, to remove that yabeles in order to make it a kosher carbon. On this, Rabbi Eliezer says all 3 of them are doiches hashabbos, whereas Rabbi Yeshua argues. The Gemara now brings the following question. Raminu, it states in the Mishnah in Eruvin, choitchin yabeles b'mikdosh, avalo b'medina. The Mishnah states over there, it's permissible to remove a yabeles by cutting it out in the Beis Hamikdash, but not in the Medina. The Mishnah goes on to say, "V'im bekli kan v'kan oser." However, if a utensil is used, for example, a knife, then it is also not only in the Medina but also in the Mikdash. So we're left with a question. Our Mishnah, the Tanakana states, which is Rabbi Yoshua, that it is prohibited to be choitech a yabeles in the Beis Hamikdash. And yet over here in the Mishnah, in Eruvin, it states that it's permissible. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Elazar, Rabbi Yossi bar Chanina, Chad Omar Idi ve'idi biyad, ha belacho ha b'yavesha. One of these 2 Amoraim state that both this and that are talking about removing the abeles with one's hand, which is an unusual form of removal. But ha belacho ha b'yavesha means that this, in our Mishnah that states, according to Tanakama, that it's also to remove it even with the yad, is because it's belacha, and lacha could have been done before Yom Tif, and therefore, or before Shabbos rather, and therefore, it is also midrabanan even in the Beis Hamikdash. Whereas over there in the Medina, over there in the Masechet Eruvin, there it's talking about in the Beis Hamikdash, whereas Yevesha, where it's not even a Isser D'Rabbanan at all. V'chad omar idi v'idi belacha v'loy kasha ha biyad ha b'kli. And the other Amor explained that both this Mishnah and that Mishnah are talking about with leich lacha, where it's talking about that the wart was moist. And it's not difficult because ha biyad over there in the Mishnah and Eruvin is talking about removing it with one's hand. And since that's only a shvus, it is mutter in the Mikdash. But ha b'kli, but over here, it's talking about using a kli, and therefore it is osir. The Gemara says, "Ulamanda omar ha biyad ha b'kli, my time olay omar idi v'idi biyad, v'lo kasha ha b'lacha ha b'yavesha." Why doesn't he learn like the other manda omar? To be that the distinction is one's talking about lacha and one's talking about yavesha. The one that's talking about lacha is talking about, although you're removing it with the yad, but since it's belacha that could have been done before Shabbos, it is prohibited, even midrabanan, even a shvus in the mikdash, where the other is yevesha. Or marloch, because he'll tell you yevesha is mifrach pricha. Yevesha is merely something that's dry, and therefore you're not even cutting it out. All you're doing is it's crumbling. So it's not considered to be a form of cutting it out. Whereby, if that's the case, then even if it was done with a kli, it would be mutter. And yet the Mishnah in Eruvin says that if it's done with a kli, kan v'kan osir, it would be osir in the mikdash. Ulamanda omar idi v'idi biyad, and the other Amora that explains that we're talking about both with the yad. And what's the distinction? Is because my time, and just my time, why doesn't he learn like the other Amora, that they're all talking about lacha, and the distinction is, one's talking about yad, the Mishnah over there in Eruvin, and in our Mishnah, Tanakam is talking about bekli, and that's why it's also in the Mikdash. Omar loch, he'll tell you, because kli, ha ketani hasam, im bekli kan v'kan osir. The Mishnah in Eruvin states that if you're going to use a kli, then it will be also even in the Beis HaMikdash. So why would he have to then teach that over here when it's already taught in the Mishnah and Eruvin? Elamai must be that we're not talking about the situation of Kli over here. The Idach, so the other one, what would he say then? If indeed he agrees that the Mishnah in Eruvin is talking about where there's an Isser, even the Beis HaMikdash using a Kli, then why do we have to teach it over here? Explains. Hadik Tani Kli, because Hacha Plukta Rabbi Eliezer Yeshua Aslashminan. The reason why our Mishnah repeats that we're talking about a Kli, according to the comments, also to explain that that's only according to Rabbi Yehoshua. But Rabbi Eliezer is going to come along and say that using a Kli would be mutter. There's a machlokes between Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer in our Mishnah. That machlokes between Rabbi Yehoshua and Rabbi Eliezer brings a kal v'chomer, and he explains that since we see that a person who shechs the carbon, which is a malacha deraisa, that's doiches hashabbos. So then certainly when it comes to a shavus, like the ones that we had just mentioned, either carrying the animal to the Beis HaMikdash, or leading it from outside the tchum, or removing the yabelis, which is all shvusin, certainly kal v'chomer, that should be mutter. That's Rabbi Eliezer's argument. So the Gemara says, Omar Rabbi Eliezer, ma'im shechita v'chulei. Rabbi Yehoshua l'taimei. So Rabbi Yehoshua answers back Rabbi Eliezer and he says, I'll bring a pircha on your kal v'chomer. Because when it comes to oichel nefesh, when somebody cooks on Yom Tif, there the Torah permits it, even though it's a malacha d'oraisa, and yet to bring food from outside the techum in order to then cook it would be a shvus, would be an isur d'rabbanan, and that would be prohibited. So we see that your kal v'chomer doesn't stand Rabbi Eliezer. So Gemara explains, Rabbi Yehoshua l'taimei. Rabbi Yehoshua is according to his reasoning. Now, when Rabbi Yehoshua pointed out a pircha, a weakness in this kal v'chomer of Rabbi Eliezer's, Rabbi Eliezer says, Rabbi Yehoshua, how can you bring me this pircha if indeed oichel nefesh, to eat on Yom Tif, is only a reshus? So you write that it's only permissible to then cook, but it would be prohibited to then do a malacha d'rabbanan in shvus, but that's only because it's a reshus. But I'm talking about a mitzvah. That's how Rabbi Eliezer then came back and argued against Rabbi Yehoshua. However, Rabbi Yehoshua does not hold that way. Why not? Explains the Gemara, because Rabbi Yehoshua l'taimei. Because Rabbi Yehoshua holds that it is a mitzvah. The Omar Simchas Yantiv nami mitzvahi. The Simchas Yantiv of eating is also a mitzvah, and still he has therefore his pircha. That when it comes to then to cook the food for Simchas Yantiv, you're permitted to do so mid-d'oraisa, even though it's a malacha d'oraisa. Yet the d'rabbanan of just merely bringing in the food from outside the tchum would be osur. The Tanya, how do we know that Rabbi Yehoshua l'shitaso holds that Simchas Yantiv eating is indeed a mitzvah? The Tanya states, Rabbi Eliezer oimer ein loy la'adam v'yantiv elo oy oichel v'shoise oy yoshev v'shoine. Rabbi Eliezer is the opinion that one must either be involved with eating and drinking on Yom Tif for his Simchas Yom Tif, or if he does not want to do that, he can be oisek in ruchnias by learning and davening all of Yom Tif, and that will then supply the Simchas Yom Tif. So we see, according to Rabbi Eliezer, it's not required that a person eat and drink, whereby that he can eat and drink, but you see that you can go ahead and learn all day on Yom Tif, and that suffices for Simchas Yom Tif. So therefore, Rabbi Eliezer holds that eating and drinking on Yom Tif is only a reshus in terms of it's not absolutely a mitzvah. That's Rabbi Eliezer's shita. Rabbi Yehoshua omer chalkeyu chetzio la'achil v'shtiya v'chetzio la'beis hamedrash. Rabbi Yehoshua says no. You should then split the two. Part of the day of Yom Tif should be spent in the spiritual pursuit of learning Torah and davening, etc. Whereas part of the day should be spent dafke eating and drinking in the physical enjoyment, whereby we see that Rabbi Yehoshua does require that the Simchas Yom Tif be performed, be fulfilled with eating and drinking. So therefore it's required. The Gemara points out their machlokes to explain. Rabbi Yochanan says they're darshaning the same pasuk, only differently. Kostuv echad oimer atzeres laHashem Elokecha. One pasuk, and I'll read you the entire pasuk. It says, Sheishes yom toicha matzos. Regards to Pesach, you shall eat matzos. Uvayam hashvi atzeres laHashem Elokecha. Lo yisasim locha. On the seventh day, it should be atzeres to laHashem Elokecha, and you shall not do malacha. That's the first pasuk. V'ksi v'kostuv echad oimer. I'll read you that verse. Bayom hashmini atzeres tiyelochem. Here it's referring to Shmini Atzeres. Kol meleches avoida lo yisasu. All the malacha you shall not do. And here it says Atzeres tiyelochem. So the first pasuk in regards to Pesach says Atzeres laHashem Elokecha. The second pasuk in regards to Shmini Atzeres states Atzeres tiyelochem. So they're both Yamim Tovim. Why does one say laHashem Elokecha? The other one says Lachem. Rabbi Eliezer Sovar Oy kuloi laHashem Oy kulu lachem. Rabbi Eliezer says to teach me that it's either all one or all the other. Rabbi Yoshua Sovar Chalkeyu Chetzi Lashem V'Chetzi Lachem. Whereas Rabbi Yeshua learns the Psachim that they're both coming to then mashlim one another. One pasuk to say that is for you, and the other one pasuk to Hashem, and you should combine the two things. The Gemara now brings that which we stated before, is going to explain again the need to then sometimes eat on Yantif, certain Yantif, Yom Tovim, it might be completely agreed upon that you must eat. And that's what the Gemara says now. First it brings a siman, Aleph, Ayin, Beis, Mem. The first letter refers to Atzeres, the first letter of Atzeres. The middle letter of the second is Beis of Shabbos. The third letter, which is the end, is referring to Purim. The Gemara discusses all three of these different days. Omar bi Elazar, Hakol Moedim, says Rabbi Elazar, the Amora, everybody agrees, Be'atzeres, the Bo'inen Nami Lochem. On Shavuos, everybody agrees. That means even Rabbi Eliezer, that you require Lochem, to eat and drink. My taimo, you would think the day of Shavuos, Kabbalas HaTorah, that's the most spiritual of pursuits, and therefore, you would not know that you're required to eat and drink. Here, everybody agrees you must eat and drink. My time, what's the reason? Gemara says, Yoim shenitna by Torah, because it's the day that the Torah is given. One should not think that the Torah is only a burden, chalila, of mitzvahs that a person has to perform. Ella, he rejoices with his goof. And some explain that in other philosophies, they will say, in the Greeks, they'll say that one has to then negate his physicality. And therefore, if he wants to pursue spiritual pursuits, he has to negate his goof. Whereas the Torah says, no, we're mekadesh the goof. Only, ayidei the limud ha-Torah, it puts the goof into check and is able to then mechavein, channel the goof in the correct way. So therefore, we dafke eat and drink on Shavuos. And everybody agrees to that. Because it's yoim shenitna b'Torah. Omar Rabbi said, Hakol moedim b'Shabbos, the bo'inen nami lochem. Everybody agrees also when it comes to Shabbos that you're required to eat and drink. My time, what's the reason? The karosa la Shabbos oinig. The Navi states that Shabbos is a day of oinig, whereby a person has to ma'anig the Shabbos, ayidei, eating and drinking with the goof. Omar Rav Yosef says, what about Purim? Hakol moedim bePurim, the bo'in nami lochem. Also, when it comes to Purim, everybody agrees you must eat and drink. My time, what's the reason? Yemei mishta v'simcha ksivbei. Because it states in regards to Purim, it's mishta, days of feasts, which include eating and drinking. Mar Breid Ravin, the Gemara tells, Kula, shosa hava yosi batanis lebar me'atzarta, upuryo mali yomi de kipuri. All year long he would fast, with the exceptions of these 3 days. With the exception of Shavuos, with the exception of Purim, and the exception of Erev Yom HaKippurim. Atzeres, the Gemara explains, why would he then eat Dafka on Atzeres? Because Yom Shenitna B'Torah, as we said before, we have to rejoice with the Torah by eating and drinking and showing that our goof, our niskadesh, ayidei the limun HaTorah, the Kabbalas HaTorah. Purim, as we stated before, you may mishta v'simcha ksiv. It says these are days of mishta, eating and drinking and feasting. Umali Yom HaKippurei, and Erev Yom HaKippurim. Why was he careful to eat and drink then? The Tanich Yebarav Medifti. it states, it states, and you shall prepare your nefesh on the 9th of the month. Now, Yom Kippur is on the 10th of the month, the 10th of Tishrei. And here it states, you shall prepare yourself, your nefesh, on the 9th of the month. And now, it uses the word preparing to say, v'inisem, you shall afflict yourself on the 9th of the month. V'chi betisha misanin? Are you afflicting yourself by not eating on the 9th? No, that's on the 10th, on Yom Kippurim, where there's a requirement of inui. So why does it state over here, when you prepare yourself on the 9th, it should be v'inisim es nafsho seichem? Elo loima lecha, to teach you, kol ha'oichel v'shoise betisha boy, my lava kosov ki'ilu mis'ane tishiv asir. Anybody who will eat and drink on the 9th of Tishrei, it's as if he fasted not only on the 10th of Tishrei, on Yom Kippurim, but also on the 9th of Tishrei. The Gemara tells now the importance of Shavuos. Rabbi Yosef b'yoyma da'atzarta omar. Rabbi Yosef on the day of Shavuos stated, Avdi, he would say, Avdi li egla tilsa. Prepare for me, would tell his servants, a egil, which is the third one that comes out of its mother, the most choicest type of meat. That's how important it is to then rejoice on Shavuos Yom of Kabbalas HaTorah. Omar, he said, Eloi hayoyma de kogarim. If it wasn't for this day of Shavuos, Kama Yosef Ika Bashuka. Rav Yosef says how many Yosefs there are in the shuk. What would make me unique? Take a look at Rashi. In Dibur HaMaschil, Ilov Hay Yoima. Shelomadeti Torah v'nisramamti. Rav Yosef says, I learned Torah and I became elevated. Hare Anoshim Harbe B'Shuk Shishmon Yosef. There are many Yoseses in the shuk. Many people whose name is Yosef in the shuk. However, Ma Beini LeBeinam, what would be different between me and all of them? What makes me unique is the Torah that I learn. And therefore the Torah itself is meroimim. It elevates the person who learns it. Thereby he rejoiced extra special on Shavuos. Rav Sheshes kol tlosin yoimin mahadele talmudei. It states that Rav Sheshes would review all of his learning every 30 days. V'toli v'koi be'ibra dedashav omar. And he would then lean on the doorpost and he would say, Chadoi nafshoi, rejoice, my nefesh. Rejoice, O nefesh of mine. Loch karoi, loch tanoi. For you I am learning psukim, for you I am learning the statements of the Torah Sheba'al Peh. And therefore he's saying, rejoice my nefesh, both in Olam Haz and Olam Haba. Rejoice my nefesh, both in the Torah Shebichsav and the Torah Sheba'al Peh. Ask the Gemara, that means he's only saying this and he's learning because he's benefiting his own nefesh. That's the only one that gets benefit. Fact, the Gemara, V'amar Rav Elozar. Elozar asks, Ilmolei Torah l'niskaimu shamayim v'aretz. Hooray, that if it wasn't from the Limud Torah, the whole world would not then be able to exist. They wouldn't be existing in the Shamayim v'Aretz. Shneimar, it says in the Pasuk, Imloi berisi yoimam v'layla. If it wasn't for my covenant of the Limud HaTorah, day and night, Chuko Shamayim v'Aretz l'samti. I would not then have the Shamayim v'Aretz. So therefore we see that the entire world benefits, both the Shamayim and the Aretz and all the other olamos, as a result of a person learning Torah. Answers the Gemara, Mikora ki Ovid inish adaita de nafshei ka Ovid. Rav Sheshes was going to then help himself to review once again. Beyond the initial learning, he's going to review every 30 days. And therefore, initially a person does it for himself, but absolutely while he's going to be learning, all of his learning he understands is going to be then also to Mekayim all of the Oilamos.